then is, in your mind, the next step for people that would like to help in the effort to sort of bridge this, or at least take the temperature down of the conversation?
The connection with the Muslim world is like that. We just can't cut it off. There are 1.4 billion Muslims, 57 nations. We need to understand Islam very, very quickly. And as you said, bring the temperature down. When we see a woman in a hijab or a veil, or a man with a beard, we often think that there's something wrong with them. Present company excluded, of course.
Professor Ahmed is also former High Commissioner of Pakistan to the United Kingdom and was political agent in the South Waziristan Agency in Pakistan, which was in the former Northwest Frontier Province, and also Commissioner of 3 divisions in Baluchistan. And the experience of governing there has informed much of his writing.
This is a bit like Christmas in the Christian world. We are in Cairo and we are celebrating the birthday of our holy prophet.
For Muslims like me, Islam is more than a religion. It is a whole way of life.
Jinnah, Pakistan and Islamic identity. To achieve the kind of impact that most academics can only dream of.
Mr. Jinnah for Pakistanis is like Washington, Jefferson and Franklin rolled into one.
It led to a film on Jinnah, where Jinnah was played by the late, great Christopher Lee.
He founded Pakistan, and I played it in this film. And I know it's the best thing I've ever done, by a long, long way.
My studies really began on 9/11. I was in class. I had just joined American University. I'd come from England. This was my first or second lecture. And I'm sitting in a class not unlike this little group here. And the students looking up at me with some incomprehension. I'm not going to say very much like you are looking at me right now, but there was that sort of, who the hell is this guy? You know, why should we be even taking his class? No one knew who I was. And at that time, at that moment, in fact, the class began to disintegrate as these kids with their cell phones began to understand something terrible was happening at that very time. The plane slammed into the Pentagon, which is just a few miles from my university. And from that day onwards, I sort of committed myself. I said, I commit myself now to promoting interfaith understanding. I literally haven't rested one 24-hour period. It's been non-stop. White House, State Department, Pentagon, think tanks, universities, talking to students, journalists. And I find that the faster I run, the more I'm needed to run faster, because there are so many misunderstandings constantly being created, gaps constantly being opened up.
No Sharia in America! You child killer! And one day, all Islam will be scoured off of the earth.
Anderson, I want you to ask yourself this question. I'm sure your mathematics is better than mine. If every Muslim in the United States of America, which is about 2% of the population, wanted Sharia, which is not the case at all, even if they wanted it, could they impose it over a population of 98% who are not Muslim in a democracy? Day and night, you hear this buzzing. It's like the angel of death. You have a lot of these drone operators sitting in the Midwest somewhere in the United States, looking at their screens and just chit-chatting as if though they're playing God.
The thistle and the drone. It's about tribal societies, and again in my work I realized that very often both the West and the Muslim world look at this relationship between the West and the world of Islam in terms of two huge blocks. What is very often missed are the interstices, those areas between national boundaries, in the mountains, on the periphery, away from the centers of power in the Muslim world. And it's there where I focused in the study. And I've done a correlation, so when you look at these areas, the areas on the periphery, that's exactly where the drone strikes are taking place. So it's the Pakhtun in Afghanistan, Pakistan, the Yemen, the Somalia, the Kurds in East Turkey. And again, you'll realize that these are all tribal societies with their codes of honor, their lineage system, their tribal clans and so on. And of course, that creates a huge problem for these societies because their own central governments are after them. Then these drones come into the picture, and those societies are small-scale societies. They're impoverished, and they're being, as it were, destroyed. And I think this is a hugely neglected area of the world.
In light of events around the world right now, we need understanding, we need ideas, and we look to you.
The exercise to understand the Muslim world is not a luxury for the United States. It is an absolute imperative.
It's 1978. In charge of the administration. I am armed with my secret weapon, a fresh PhD in anthropology. We need to read more about each other, Muslims and non-Muslims, visit our houses of worship, visit homes, make friends, everything we can do to try to have some mutual comprehension. Muslims, Muslim leadership, they have to do a better job in explaining their religion, their culture, their traditions.
Muslims often make that mistake. They live in a bubble.
And Americans need to reach out to Muslims as citizens. These are citizens. For most Americans, Muslims are what the Russians were for Winston Churchill, a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. And I, as an anthropologist, provide a key to open that society, to demystify it.
And the more I read, the more people I met, I began to realize how essentially similar we are. And if we could promote this understanding, it would be a better world.
We did a program with you and the father of the murdered journalist Daniel Pearl, Judea Pearl. This made a huge impact.
These people transcend this tragedy and convert it into an act, a symbol of hope.
Journey into Islam. I traveled with my students and we went to the Middle East, to South Asia, to Far East Asia. And we came back with hundreds of interviews and proper questionnaires conducted in the field.
Tikkun Olam, that is healing a fractured world. We have to go out and heal this world.
The bishop on my right, the imam on my left, the spiritual pillars of Las Vegas. And Bishop, you have a church just next to the mosque.
The imam and I, we have forged a great relationship. He's my brother, my brother in the Lord, and my brother just in general.
We need to be promoting the idea of the dialogue of civilizations and away from the idea of the clash of civilizations.
Your project is certainly, I think, something that is very pleasing to God, above all. God, the Father of us all. And it's truly a work of God, and I think that is evident in your desire to bring together the people of the world in greater love and respect for one another.
We are honored to have you.
Jako smo zahvalni za vašu knjigu koju smo prevrhali.
We are very thankful for the book that we translated.
To je knjiga koja nas inspirirala, nas ulema, moram to kazati.
That your book was inspiration to our ulema here.
Dakle, i to je nešto što je posebno, naravno.
That's something very special and very important for us.
Hvala vam na svemu što činite, naravno.
Thank you for everything that you're doing.
Da se ovi mostovi grade.
For those bridges to be built between Muslims and other.
I would just like to commend the good doctor for his wonderful work in helping to change the mindset of not only Americans but citizens of the world. This is a very important effort because many of our ills in society come about as a result of ignorance. And what the good doctor is doing is helping to break down those walls and those barriers of ignorance and bringing us into a new understanding and a new enlightenment.
So that work is so important, that you devote your life, that you put yourself into this hardship of traveling around. And I know what it means. I cannot think of more warm feelings than I have towards your work and the work of, I think it's wonderful that you have another generation following up. So you have really my most heart feelings to succeed.
The essence of America must be religious pluralism. There is a statue of Jefferson outside his university alongside an angel. The angel is carrying a tablet. The tablet says 1786, religious freedom. He's really saying that this is a new world, it's a new vision of society. And we have to create a world which will become a model for the rest of the world. Tolerance, of pluralism, of acceptance. We are living at a time of what we could call an existentialist threat to our common humanity. I think if our students are aware that we are facing something bigger than the color of my skin or the passport that I hold, I think they become aware and they become your champions. It is that generation, this coming generation, that has to pick up these ideas and run with them.
What is America? America's all these people. Thank you for speaking to us here at the BBC News.
Journey into America, the challenge of Islam, Ambassador Akbar Ahmed. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Everything should remind us of the glory, of the wonder of life on earth. Everyone, it's not Jewish, not Muslim, not Christian, not atheist, everyone. We share our common humanity. It goes back to the Quranic verse that we made you into different tribes and nations so you may know each other.
I heard it in Rumi's poetry. I know it was in Gandhi's gaze. I sensed it in Mandela's auditory. I saw it in Jesus' ways.
I have a duty from John Paul II. He said, every time you meet a Muslim, please give him a hug and just say, this hug is from the Pope.
It is God's greatest gift. It raises us high above. It is the bridge over the rift. It is love, love, love.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Naeem Mushtaq here. I'm sitting in Islamabad, Pakistan. And this is a part of a series program, Coffee with Friends. But in today's session, we are very blessed and honored to have Dr. Akbar S, Ahmed, who is with us from Washington, D.C, USA. And today's topic is on interfaith dialogue, the dialogue between Islam and the West, interfaith activities in Muslim communities, interfaith activities in the West, how Muslims perceive this, interfaith activities, and what is my experience in Pakistan and what is Dr. Akbar S. Ahmed's experience in the West, being a Pakistani, being a Muslim. So we will try to cover a lot of areas on interfaith dialogue. And I'm not going to repeat his introduction because you have seen his introduction before this discussion in form of a video format. And may Allah bless him with good health and long life so that we may enjoy and he may keep on writing more and more books on developing understanding and developing a bridge between the both. Now, sir, thank you very much for your precious time. And first of all, I would like to know, how are you in this COVID situation? Is everything good?
Doctor, before I answer that, let me thank you for inviting me to your show. I've enjoyed being on your show before. It's special, it's widely seen, and it's an honor to be discussing these issues with you because I know you are, as a scholar, an academic, you yourself are interested in raising these issues and examining them. So thank you so much.
So, sir,
in terms of COVID, I am like all our brothers and sisters all over the planet, whatever your religion, whatever your color, we are all facing this pandemic through lockdown, through adjustments. It's not a pleasant, not a happy experience or period of human history. But it does show us the unity, the overall unity of humanity. It also forces us to think about these global issues. And that is what I'm involved in, stepping back and looking at our experience as a world community and where we've got to in history.
I think, sir, in this COVID situation, the nature is in dialogue with us silently. We are trying to rediscover our human, side. We were very much busy in our daily life, politics, social life, but suddenly because of this COVID, because of this lockdown, we are rediscovering our values, our human, connectivity and our human values. So there's a lot to discuss about this. Coming back to the interfaith dialogue, because we have a very short time and I would like to discuss maximum as much as possible. First of all, you have traveled a lot. You were in Pakistan, you are from a Muslim background, and now you're serving in the USA, you have traveled in the Europe. So after your, this multi-dimensional experience and after your this international travels, how do you define or see this process of interfaith dialogue? Because in Pakistan, a person living only in Pakistan, he has a Pakistani mindset maybe, or a person living in the USA, who has never been to any Arab country or Muslim country, he will think of interfaith dialogue from an American perspective. But from your, broad perspective, meeting a lot of people from different walks of life, how do you discover or how do you interpret now the process of interfaith dialogue?
Dr. That's a very important question, especially for me, who, as a scholar who has traveled extensively, I've been very blessed, very privileged. I've been to Muslim countries, non-Muslim countries, interacted with every religion and in some depth. So I have learned to appreciate other cultures, other peoples, other communities, and it has heightened my respect for my own culture and my own traditions. This is always the paradox of travel, that you understand yourself better when we are traveling. Now I look deep into myself, into my culture as a Muslim, in terms of interfaith. And I'm amazed at the clarity of interfaith in terms of Islam. I look at the letter wrote to the monks at St. Catherine's Monastery. Even today, you can read that letter in which he guarantees, this is the prophet of Islam, when Islam is expanding in the Middle East, he guarantees those Christians, those monks, full protection, full security for them, for their families, for their churches, for the integrity of worship. That is interfaith. And then I read the great Sufis and scholars of Islam, Rumi and Ibn Arabi, the Sheikh al-Akbar. I read the great saints, Sufi saints of Pakistan, Bhit Bulle Shah, who said you can destroy the walls of a temple, you can destroy the walls of a mosque, destroy everything in sight, but do not destroy the human heart, because that is where God lives. Now, it's much more beautiful and much more striking in Punjabi, but we are speaking in English. And I do want to say that deep in Islam is a very hard core of a vision of humanity as one, as interfaith. And why that is reading the Quran. When the Quran describes God, it does not say Rab al-Muslimin. It says Rab al-Alameen. Rab with God is God of the entire universes, not just universe. What does that mean? God is not saying, I am the God only of you as Muslims, but not of non-Muslims. God is reaching out to all of humanity. God is define God. I think it's very beautiful, very meaningful, and teaches us something. So both as a Muslim and as a scholar and as a Pakistani, because remember that Quaid-e-Azam, Mr. Jinnah, also had a very clear idea of interfaith. That is what led him for the Pakistan movement, when he felt that the Muslims of India could not live in security and under protection after the British go. He began to see the riots, the pressures on the Muslims, and it forced him into going for the Pakistan movement. And in the end, the Pakistan he had in his mind, and I know these days you hear a lot of criticism of Quaid-e-Azam, that he didn't leave any books or any idea of Pakistan. That's nonsense. If you read his early speeches at the Constituent Assembly, he gives a very clear, very defined idea. He's a brilliant lawyer, and he defines it. He said, this is how Pakistan should be. And it really reflects his grand vision of interfaith. He defines this. He says, Christians can go to the churches, Hindus can go to the temples, Muslims can go to the mosque. My goodness, what more do you want?
He talks against corruption, against nepotism, against bribery. He talks about the care, the need for the preservation and protection of the poor and the vulnerable. That is the vision, basically, of interfaith, of caring for each other as human beings. And I think in this era of COVID, these are great lessons that we should be falling back to and relearning.
Lovely. This is a very beautiful answer summarizing all the aspect. There's another interesting observation of mine which I would like to share with you, and I would like you to comment on it. Traditionally, when we talk about interfaith dialogue, we are thinking about theology. Our focus is towards God and dogmas and what we believe and what we don't believe. And in most of the interfaith meetings that I have been a part in Pakistan, they are deciding who will go to heaven and who will go to hell by discussing theology. So interfaith dialogue is like a debate and discussion between the two faiths, which is better and which is not. When I meditated on the process, I discovered that there is a dialogue within the dialogue. And that is the real dialogue of the Quran, the focus of the Quran and the focus of the Holy Bible, the four Gospels, the New Testament. The entire focus is the human beings and humanity, not the God itself. God comes second, but you need to look around yourself and you need to take care of the people, their suffering, their problem, their situations. So I realized, and after going through the text of the Sufis, as you mentioned and rightly mentioned, that when we think of interfaith dialogue from a Sufi perspective or from a genuine original Islamic perspective, it is about the well-being of the society and the people around us, whether they are Muslim, Jews, Christian, whoever they are. They are the creation of God, and we as the follower of our religion, our school of thought, whether we are Muslim, Christian, Jews, it is our responsibility to take care of the creation of God. And there's a hadith of Holy Prophet Muhammad that the whole creation, including Jews, Christian, and Muslim, is Allah's family, Allah's the family, and the best among you is he who is best to his family. So I discovered from this process of interfaith dialogue that there's another dialogue that God talks about, is about sharing the pain and suffering of another human being, connecting with one another on human to human level. And here we think the commonalities of religion and ethics is very important. Now there is a shift slowly going on in Pakistan, and I think in the world. They are interpreting theology with the focus on humanity and sociology. They are no more talking about heaven and hell. They are talking about heaven and hell on earth, where we are living and how we are living, how we can improve the quality of our living standards, whether we are living in the USA or whether we are living in the Pakistan. So how do you see, because some evangelists on the Christian side, some Jews, some Buddhist, some Muslim also, they still prefer that old idea of theological debates rather than sharing the problems and live with one another on a practical dialogue basis. So I would like to your kind to comment on this.
This debate and discussion needs to be seen on both levels. There is a theological aspect to it. You cannot ignore it, because that is our history, that is our tradition, and that eventually shapes and drives us in our world. But secondly, the point you raised, that we must also look at it in the social and cultural context.
Exactly.
For example, take Pakistan. You mentioned Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is seen abroad just as a Muslim country. They'll say it's a Muslim country. Of course, it is a Muslim country. Pakistanis are very proud of being Muslim, and 90-95% of the population may be Muslim. But what we don't realize is the variety, the rich variety of Pakistan society. Pakistanis are Hindus, Pakistanis are Sikhs. The birth of Sikhism, one of the world's great religions, is in Pakistan. Buddhism is very strongly associated with Pakistan. Hinduism is associated with Pakistan. Some of their great mythologies are based in what is Pakistan. So we have to be very careful about how we define our own societies. My daughter, Dr. Amne Hoti, has written a brilliant book based after fieldwork. She spent 2 years in the fields, traveling all over Pakistan, in the interior of Sindh and Punjab and up to the north to Chitral and so on. and it is called Gems and Jewels. So gems and jewels are the Sufic terms for minorities in religions, because the Sufi poets and saints looked at each other, especially the minorities, and valued them. They said they're like a treasure. You must treat them like a treasure. I think that's very inspiring. And I really would want Pakistanis to understand how rich this society is. Killing everyone and making them one thing, as some of our neighbors are trying to do, is not improving society. It is detracting something from society. It's an unnatural process. It's reversing history. We saw that Hitler tried it in the 1930s and he failed. He failed in a spectacular way. So we have to reach out and embrace humanity, not reject humanity. And this is one of the great lessons of Gems and Jewels, when you actually meet people who are not Muslim and yet are very Pakistani. It was amazing how these different Sikhs and Hindus in the book that Amne interviewed could say with great pride, we are Pakistanis and we are proud of Pakistan. And as you know, many of the Christians and Hindus and Sikhs have joined the services and defended Pakistan. So we really need to understand the complexity of interfaith dialogue, particularly now in the 21st century. So I'm really grateful to you, Doctor, for raising this very issue. And I hope that Pakistanis see this and absorb the ideas and learn something from it and maybe benefit from it.
Sir, what Pakistani government can do to promote these ideas that you're talking about through their policies?
Pakistani government can do a lot, Dr. because Pakistan, and I must give full marks to the government because they have appointed a minister for interfaith, there's a minister for religious affairs. So Pakistan is responding. I know that the Islamic Ideology Council, Dr. Qibla Iyaz, although he's coming from an Islamic scholarship point of view, he's very active in interfaith dialogue. The Higher Education Commission, Dr. Buneri and his colleagues in the Higher Education Commission, Dr. Safdar Ali Shah, they are very interested in reaching out and really including the different colors and different texts and different varieties of Pakistanis in their studies. So Pakistanis need to be supported. Now you said, what can they do? They can improve these studies, have films on them, have documentaries, have interviews. So ordinary Pakistanis say, wait a minute, they're not all like me. They may be different. And by the way, the same thing applies, Dr. because we are talking about a universal phenomenon. The Indians can do this in India so that Muslims are seen repeatedly in the media, not as today, where they are demonized and shown in very bad, negative colors as terrorists and so on, but seen as ordinary people, as ordinary Indians, many of them having contributed brilliantly to Indian culture and Indian society. Similarly, America, where American, especially the white population, needs to see African Americans, needs to see Muslims, needs to see Indians, Pakistanis as Americans. Only then can we fulfill our destiny as human beings on earth. If we don't, we are building walls around ourselves. We're saying, I am right, you're wrong. And I always say in teaching my classes, I always say that is a slippery slope. Because when you go down the slope of hatred, so today you're hating one community, tomorrow you hate another community, and then another community. You remember there's a very famous quotation from Germany during the Second World War, when the Germans were picking up and made the entire Jewish population, which resulted in this one of the most terrible episodes of history, the Holocaust. So this famous priest, he said that first they came for the Protestants, and there was no one to speak. Then they came for the Catholics, there was no one to speak. Then they came for the Jews, and there was no one to speak. And then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me. And I was a victim. So you see, in the end, when you abandon humanity, Dr. Saab, you are abandoning yourself. That's why I'm absolutely so impressed by Allama Iqbal or Bulle Shah or Brit Shah or Data Saab will constantly speak of University, Ajmer Sharif, Gharib Niwas. He talks of Sulh Kul, peace with all. He says Sulh Kul with everyone. Everyone is my brother, my sister, and we have to take this path. Or the slip slope means that today You'll have Muslims and you'll have Sunnis, what sect you belong to, share my background. But I'm a Sunni Muslim purely by accident. I could have been born in another faith. So it does not mean I should be an enemy of other faiths. I should be a better version of what I can aspire to. That's all. Otherwise, I'm seeing in Pakistan, I'm seeing with great sorrow that Muslims are now killing other Muslims. So today you say, well, you're not a Muslim, you're not a good Muslim, you're a bad Muslim. Who are we to judge people? We should just be good human beings. And good human beings are clear. We know who they are. They're honest. The Quran, the Hadith are full of directions on how to be a good human being. Be good to others. Most important, be good to your neighbors. Be good to other people. Treat them like you want them to treat you. Be honest. Believe in the commandments from God. Say your prayers and be honest. Don't be dishonest. Don't backbite. Backbiting is a terrible sin in Islam, and we know why. It's like eating the flesh of the person you're backbiting. These are great values for us to live in a human society. This is what we need to improve on, not to say, oh, you know, our neighbor, he's not a good Muslim because he belongs to that sect, that religion. That is a slippery slope, and it will end in disaster for that society. That's what history teaches us, Dr. And I'm talking now as a scholar of history.
So in most of the Pakistani society and in most of the Islamic countries, in order to get guidance from the Holy Quran, we usually go through the commentaries written by various scholars. And majority of the commentaries that I have gone through in Pakistan and mostly in Arabic, they are faith-based, or I would say they're discussing mostly regarding faith and the theological aspect of the Quranic commandments and text. But the things we are discussing right now, interfaith dialogue, the universality of the message, do you think we need to write another commentary with focus on the future and the present, what is going on and what we want to achieve in the future? And we need to reinterpret those verses which are being used by the extremists and terrorists to justify their killings of the non-Muslims.
But sir, this is a very important point you raised. It's a theological point. And I hope my friend Dr. Qibla, who heads the Islamic Ideology Council, will listen to this and respond to it. Texts like the Quran is something that is universal and something that is permanent. We know that, and we don't want to touch that or alter that or edit that. But we also know that the great commentaries of these great Islamic scholars, and they were great scholars when I mentioned Ibn Rushd or Ghazali or Avicenna or Ibn Taymiyyah, all these are great scholars, but they're all writing in their own cultural context. It's very important. For example, I analyzed why the Hanbali school has a certain way of looking at the world, where the sense is of Islam under siege. And remember what you mentioned, that school of thinking in Islam has a huge impact on a lot of young men today. They respond to that, especially the groups that turn to violence. Unfortunately, why is this happening? Go back to Ibn Taymiyyah. When is he writing? He's writing in the context of the Mongol invasions of the Arab world. He's writing when Baghdad, which is the heart of the Arab world, the Abbasid world, which has been the greatest Muslim empire in history till then, that is destroyed. They just absolutely destroy Baghdad. They butcher the Caliph of Islam. He's rolled up in a carpet and horses gallop over him and mush him. They treat the keema, make out of him. Then they destroy all the great libraries. They throw the books into the rivers. They destroy the irrigation systems. They destroy a whole civilization. Now, in that context, he's writing as a Muslim scholar. And in that context, he is very harsh because he cannot talk of love and humanity because he's just hanging on. He's hanging on for dear life because he's on the verge of being wiped out. So you've got to put it in a context. Sheikh Akbar Ibn Arabi is writing in a different context. He's also living as a contemporary, but he's in Andalusia. And Andalusia has seen this very rich culture and very rich civilization, great deal of synthesis. And he's reaching out. Who are his great role models? If you mention this in Pakistan, people are going to get shocked. he says, I'm inspired by the great teacher who's my best friend. It is Jesus Christ. Now, we know as Muslims how much respect and love we have for Jesus in the Quran. But Ibn Arabi is directly inspired by him. And he's inspired by Jesus to the point that he says, I'm giving away all my possessions. And I'm going into the world like a malang, like a Sufi. Because I can't live in this world. I want to go and show my love for God. And he writes some of the most beautiful verses and mystic verses in praise of God and the Quran. So his context is different. Allama Iqbal is again different, writing in the time of colonialism and the transition from a colonial era to a post-colonial era. So a lot of his poetry, and I'm very moved when I read the Shikwa or Jawab-e-Shikwa, there's so much josh in it, there's so much anger in it, there's so much walwala and energy in it, because he's writing as a young man who's seeing the problems of the world and how to challenge them. But what is his conclusion? Ki Muhammad se wafa tune to hum tere hain, jahan cheeze kya law kalam tere hain. So he has a challenge and he has a solution. So there's much to learn from them, but every generation must find its own voice. And frankly speaking, I think we tend to get too influenced by this is a communist thinking and this is socialist thinking and this is a Muslim thinking. No, there's one thinking was you're responding to an environment around you and you must find your own voice and you must find it in relationship to your own tradition, because that is something that is permanent and something we have inherited.
So we need to produce a new Islamic literature with a win-win situation to connect past with the present and design the future accordingly.
Yes, because unless you understand the past, you're not going to understand the future. And again, I want to make a general point. The teaching of history in Pakistan needs to be really improved because it's virtually non-existent.
Exactly.
It's virtually non-existent. The emphasis on education in Pakistan, first of all, is such a little investment we make in education. We need to make much, much more investment. We need to have investment in science and social sciences and history and all these subjects in education. But then within that, we need to have a very much more vigorous investment in history, the teaching of history, in the social sciences, because without that, we are not going to understand our own history. So when we come across history books today, which I must point out are being rewritten, for example, in India, they're rewriting history. So the Mughals, the great Mughals, one of the greatest dynasties of all history, when the Mughals were ruling in India, India was the richest nation in the world, not the second or third. It was richer than China, and it was the most powerful. This is under the Mughals. And today you see what's happening in India with the riots and butchery and killing, and unfortunately that great tradition is being dismantled. It really is very sad and heartbreaking to see what's happening with that very glorious civilization that once was. So that is how people are dealing with history and the consequences you're seeing in society today. So we have to learn from that and understand that unless we rediscover our own history, unless we go back and produce books that our young generation will say, yes, this was our history. And I'm proud of it. Our history where we contributed to art, architecture, literature, books. This is what we gave to the world. And this is the continuing tradition that we have inherited. Very important point. But unfortunately, our emphasis is on producing degrees which give us jobs, so we become bankers or business, we make money, we have houses, we have lands, and that's all that we are caught up in. We must remember, where are we going to take this money and these lands and houses? They will stay here. We will leave for the next world, but our material goods won't. Therefore, our emphasis should be something that is not material and something that is called education and ideas and the intellect.
Well, thank you so much, mashallah. This is, very rich information. Now I'll shift toward some international issues after 9/11. And I wrote a book in 2005. This is my first book in Urdu language on Interfaith Dialogue. And at that time, no one believed in Interfaith Dialogue. People used to think that dialogue is only about, conversion and debates and all those things. And Alhamdulillah, I'm still alive after writing this book because I use the Quranic text and hadith to support my theological concepts. And
mashallah, you're a pioneer in this field. You're a pioneer.
Yeah, but the situation after that I felt, because Interfaith Dialogue in Pakistan converted into a business. People are running after the donations and money, and the embassies are, different embassies are involved, and they are paying their people to, work for them. Two observations I noted, and I would like to share my observation with you, and I would like you to comment on it. Number one, I saw that Interfaith Dialogue is converted into a sort of a group where discussion starts with the idea that all the problems that we see in the world, Muslims are responsible. Islam and Muslims are responsible. And the discussion and the meeting ends with the agenda that unless the Muslims are right, there will be no peace in the world. And then I participated in few meetings. Then I concluded that, then I also spoke in the meetings. I said, Interfaith Dialogue is not about blaming one party or the other party. Interfaith Dialogue is about sitting together and see where the problem lies. If the problem is in the Christian world or the Jewish world or the politics or even in the Islamic world, we need to sit together and see how can we solve that problem jointly by helping one another. It is not about Muslims and Islam. So this is one observation I observed, that sometimes the banner is Interfaith Dialogue, but under the banner, the entire focus is on Islam and Muslims. And they don't want to talk about their participation, their responsibility of creating a problem which Muslims are facing. And when Muslims come back with their reaction, they are labeled as terrorists, they are labeled as extremists. You got my point?
Dr. Sahab, I agree with you. The importance of Interfaith Dialogue is not to try to convert someone or to show that you are better than them.
Yeah.
The idea is to exchange information and ideas so you may get to know them better and they may get to know you better. That is dialogue.
Yeah.
And from that, anything can happen. Anything can happen from that. Now, you had a tough time in Pakistan, and I'm sorry to hear that. And I would like to congratulate you for continuing with your efforts. But think of what I went through in America after 9/11, because society as a whole began to focus on Muslims. And they began to say that all Muslims are basically supporters of terrorism or terrorists. It was a very uncomfortable time to be a Muslim. And in the midst of this, I was non-stop. Literally, I didn't stop for a 24-hour cycle. I was speaking at the Pentagon, White House, State Department, universities, think tanks, campuses all across America, and promoting interfaith dialogue with the Jews, with the Hindus, with the Muslims. And I must say one thing, Dr. Saab, I must say one thing. In the midst of all that, I also had a lot of encouragement so that people were responding. For example, at the National Cathedral, this is the biggest, most magnificent cathedral of the United States. This is where the presidents come for their final burial sequence, and it's part of American history. That is where the bishop, and including the senior rabbi of Washington, they combined to give a special evensong in my honor. Now, this was in 2005, and this was a unique event. Bishop said, we don't have an evensong because that's a prayer dedicated to an individual, not even to a Christian. But the idea of dedicating it to a Muslim scholar, was unprecedented. And yet they did that, and there were over 1,000 people in the church, and there were Muslims in the audience. The BBC covered it, and Muslims were crying. There were tears in their eyes, and because I had read from the Quran that I referred to the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him. They were crying because they said, we could not imagine that we would be hearing the Quran Sharif and hearing reference with love and affection and admiration for the Prophet of Islam, our Prophet. It was really so moved. So that happened. Then let me tell you from the other side, because we are on the subcontinent, it's important that we have dialogue and understanding, better understanding with our neighbors, India on the one side, Afghanistan on the other, that the Gandhi Center launched their first ever Peace Award, the Gandhi Peace Award.
Wow.
And they honored me, they selected me, they said, you will be our first awardee. And I was very, very much moved by that because, I knew my background, I knew the tensions between India and Pakistan. So I requested my friend, my class fellow from FC College, Ashraf Qazi, who was the Pakistan ambassador, I said it'd be wonderful if you came and joined us for this Gandhi Center event. After all, I have a Pakistani background, and spoke. After I got my award and I gave my talk, and he agreed. I must give him full marks for that. And I also asked the director of the Gandhi Center. I said, "Can you ask the Indian ambassador?" And they sent one of their very senior diplomats. So it was a unique moment of interfaith dialogue in the midst of everything. And I'm getting an award from the Gandhi Center, and you have the Pakistan ambassador and the Indian senior diplomat in dialogue and conversation. I think these are the examples that certainly encourage me. And I would urge, and I hope your program is seen by the clerics, the Christians, the Hindus, the Muslims, especially the Muslim clerics, Badshai Mosque Imam and so on. Let them take initiatives. Let them do something similar. And don't think that Muslims can't do this, because they don't know their history. Muslims are constantly reaching out, and if they have any doubt about it, read history. Muslims were the greatest when they were confident about Islam, when they felt that here's a religion that can withstand any dialogue with confidence and something to teach others.
Now, you're very right. With the efforts of the existing government and with a lot of interfaith dialogue work going on, there are a lot of Miladun Nabi, the birthday of Holy Prophet Muhammad, is being celebrated in many churches in Pakistan. All the gurdwaras are being renovated now, and they are going to be operative in Pakistan. And Hindu temples are also working. So there is a change in Pakistan, very positive change. And I think the future is a very bright future we have in Pakistan.
Dr. Saab, also I think Pakistanis should be aware through channels like yours, which are more academic, more intellectual, but they should be aware that it's all right to think within Pakistan, because we all live in a bubble, all societies live in a sort of cultural bubble. But we need to be aware that we can talk about Islam and how great we are, and we see some terrible incident where the Sri Lankan man is killed and then burnt alive, or some Christian church is attacked, or some Hindus attacked. And we say, well, all right, we are very tolerant, but these people are not that good. So this one incident. What we don't realize is that turn that coin round the other way.
Yeah.
So when I go to a mosque or to a church or to a synagogue or to a temple in the United States, and I plead for Islam and for Muslims, and I say, look, we are facing Islamophobia, we are facing prejudice, we need more understanding. We need you to understand that we are good people. The first question they ask me is, yes, but what is happening in Pakistan?
Exactly.
What is happening to this community and that community? What happened to that Sri Lanka? I have a very difficult time explaining that, because we cannot explain violence. Which Muslim, which good Muslim, which decent Muslim would say that was justified? I know no Muslim would say that. So it really, Dr. Saab, I congratulate you for what you're doing. And I would urge you to continue doing this with a lot of vigor. Take this discussion, take it to your Minister for Interfaith Dialogue, and ask him to comment on this program, because you need to involve government and the instruments of government, whether at the federal level or at the provincial level, so that they become involved in this debate, and maybe have this debate at different levels, at the division level, district level, so ordinary people get involved in your debate and discussion.
This is my plan, basically, is to invite you and then share the recording of this program with all the concerned authorities, so that they can, get some guidance from your thought process. They can connect you directly for further policy making advices. And sometimes I see it is not the matter of religion. Sometimes it is a matter of politics. Sometimes politics are involved, and religion is being used, both in here and in the States. When I was in the USA, before going to USA, I had that traditional idea about the Americans. But when I went there, I find that American people, generally, even the officials, government officials, they are very caring, very loving. And there was totally a different picture. I think in order to stay healthy in your mind, one must also avoid media, watching too many news channels.
Media, Dr. Saab, I'm sorry to say they have been very negative. And, again, you meet them as human beings. They're sometimes very sensible, intelligent, warm, but they are all guided by what's called ratings. So they need to create a sensation and then have more people watching them so they make more money. And that is where they are corrupted. And unfortunately, it's got very bad now. I remember I was having dialogue with some very prominent Jewish figures, very prominent Christian figures, and the media were just ignoring that. And I said, why are you ignoring us? And they said, because you're not news. If you people were to fight with each other, if you threw a chair at each other and abused each other, they were, let's explore our faith, let's love each other, let's have compassion. That's no story. And I understood then that they're not responding to noble and ideal ideas of interfaith, but in terms of ratings and stories. And that is the tragedy of our modern world. That is part of living in the modern world. The ideas coming from South Asia are cultures from South Asia. The ideas coming, I mean, look at the beauty of the ideas. Go back in history, and you have Islam brings you Sulh Kul, peace with all. You have ideas of Shanti, Shama. These are beautiful concepts from Sanskrit culture, Hindu culture. These are great values that we must in the media are spreading. Dr. Saab, let me now wish you good luck. And let me say that I really admire the work you're doing. And I just pray that you continue doing this and not get discouraged. And remember that there are a lot of people following you and following you with admiration and with applause.
So thank you so much. But with your permission, one last question. I know your time is very precious. I have a lot of Palestinian friends. And when I look at the media, the books, I see a different definition of the term peace and interfaith dialogue. It's like I'm living in my house and someone comes from outside and then throw me out. And then when I start demonstrating or, when I say, let me get back to my own house, and they say, you need to be a peaceful person. Let's have a dialogue between us so that I can stay inside and you can stay outside. So sometimes the term peace and interfaith dialogue, how do you define it, keeping the Middle East or Palestinian issue in mind?
Dr. Saab, the Palestinian issue or the Kashmir issue or the issue of the Rohingya, the issue of the Yemen, these are very intractable, hard, complex problems. And so far, humanity has failed to try to resolve them. To me, these are really critical issues because they involve our different faiths. The Palestine-Israel conflict involves Jews, Christians, Muslims. And I have met so many people from all three faiths who are desperately trying and sincerely trying to promote dialogue and understanding on both sides. It's not easy, but both sides. I've seen rabbis working very hard trying to promote better understanding between the Jews and the Palestinians. I've come across Palestinians who desperately, there was a father whose daughters were killed and he spent all his life then trying to promote better understanding. So it's a very difficult solution to find. It's not easy. You can't say, well, here's the solution. But if you give up trying to have peace and dialogue and build bridges, then there's no hope. Then it's a straightforward clash. Clash is not going to lead to anything because women are involved, children are involved, and displaced people are involved. So all we can say is we pray that both sides who are determined to find peace, Because ultimately we have to pray that both the Jews and the Muslims are able to live in peace and honor each other there as good neighbors and good human beings. That's what we have to pray for. If you can find a solution in the near future, we would support it. But ultimately, the aim should be, even if it's a long-term solution, that they must find a solution based in peace, justice, and harmony. More you cannot say because no one has that kind of authority and power. And we've seen all the worlds, whether it's the US or the UN, they fail to really come up with a solution.
So one last request, and then we'll ask your permission is, you have done a lot of work with Muslim and Jewish interfaith dialogue also. And in Pakistan, unfortunately, there is not a single solid reference book that we could use in our MPhil PhD students. Maximum the people have approached is Maulana Madoudi's Judaism in the Quran and Christianity in the Quran. We are understanding Judaism from Quranic perspective, but we are not able to understand Judaism from Jewish sources. Me being here in Pakistan, have to go through a lot of difficulties to find original Jewish resources. So maybe what I would suggest, humbly request, is to write a basic understanding of the Jewish religion with reference to Islam, with reference to history, culture, from a positive perspective, with an aim to develop a relationship, a good relationship, and a bridge between the both communities so they can understand one another. Because here,
Dr. Saab, this point of yours is fascinating, because the book that I referred to, that Dr. Hoti has written, called Gems and Jewels, has exactly these perspectives. You will have chapters on Judaism, chapters on Hinduism. So she's also a scholar, so she studied these world faiths. So you read about Hinduism or Judaism, and then you see these ideas applied to the community in Pakistan. So as a primer, as something to start with, you will find some very good material there. And for a more detailed, more analytic, more scholarly study of each faith, you really need a department in Pakistan and maybe Qaid-e-Azam University or Islamic University to give a project that, like you mentioned, to request or put on contract some very prominent Jewish scholars, Christian scholars to come up with exactly your charter. I think it's a great idea, and I think your Minister for Religious Affairs and Interfaith Affairs should really consider this.
Yeah, and I would also request you to, if it is possible, to connect me with Dr. Hoti so I can also conduct an interview on the book.
Of course, yes. The Cambridge Alum magazine, which is the top magazine in Cambridge, has a beautiful article on her, very extensive article. The Church Times of England, which is a major newspaper in England, sponsored and supporting the church, has also got an article. So she's very active in promoting this interfaith dialogue in England and in Pakistan. So certainly there are many people like her who are doing this kind of work, and we have to encourage them. Unfortunately, we just ignore that, and we either go for the quote-unquote official scholars, or we just ignore them. So this is our treasure, and we must really value our treasure.
So, sir, thank you so much for your precious time, and your closing remarks or message for the both people listening in the West and people listening in Pakistan or in the Muslim communities.
My message is simple. When I'm asked for a message, I give the message of Islam as a religion of peace, but a lot of people react against that. So I then fall back to another beautiful message coming from the Abrahamic tradition. That is the message contained in the Judaic tradition, which is translated as Tikkun Olam. And Tikkun Olam means to heal a fractured world. So here is a command from God to the Jewish people that go out and heal a fractured world. That's a command to the Jewish people, because the world is fractured, it is hurting, it's in pain. Go and heal it. That's the duty of every good Jew. And similarly, I would say for Muslims, it is our command to find the Rahman and Rahim, the compassion and the mercy that God is telling us to. So we have to go out and make a world where there's more mercy and more compassion. Because when I look at the world, and especially what's happening to the Muslims, my heart really bleeds, because I can't sleep at night. I mean, these days I'm having nightmares because I saw some documentaries coming out of Afghanistan. Little children, 3-4-year-old children who are like my grandchildren in age. And I'm just thinking to myself, these kids are running around without shoes. They don't have food to eat. Their mother's sitting there, the BBC camera goes and interviews her. She's got 5 kids. There's no food. It's snowing outside and they're sleeping on the floor. And I say, my God, how are they going to survive? So all the mother wants to do is sell a child. Which parent wants to sell a child? So that is happening in Afghanistan. So my heart bleeds, because then I say, we are as a ummah really failing Muslims. And then I say, on the other hand, they're Muslims with billions and billions of dollars. Do they even care? And again, I go back to my point. Are they going to take that money with them? Can they do something good for humanity and embrace humanity? So I hope that through your dialogue on this program, people will have more awareness and more sense of what is happening in the world.
Inshallah, sir. Your people love you in Pakistan, and they watch your program. They are waiting for your program. Every time I upload it, and I get a very good response from the people. May God give you a long life and you have a healthy life. And inshallah, we'll come back again with another program as per your schedule and your availability, sir. So
always available, Dr. Look after yourself, carry on the struggle.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, sir. Allah Hafiz. Goodbye.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.